Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Welcome to another edition of the Lambom Show. Today, we are continuing our series on mental health within the immigrant communities. And today we are talking about kids. It's kind of strange that we'll be talking about mental health and kids, but I think it's one of those areas that, in addition to all that we have said thus far, we started off talking about men, we went over to women. I am sure it is but appropriate that we talk about kids. It is my intention with this series that we are able to continue the conversations around the 25 push ups for 25 days, which is how our guest tonight I was personally fascinated watching her do her 25 push ups. And what struck me was I think the last 5 days or so, she also brought her kids to be part of the push ups. And that was quite inspiring. I had seen others do it in a way, maybe just because all of this was part of highlighting the fact of mental health in our community. But our guest tonight comes from a different background. I'm going to let her talk about it. This evening, we'll just want to get into that journey of mental health with our kids. And we're talking about kids, not just 2-year-old, 10-year-old, but also within the teenage population. We find that many of our teenagers are also having mental health challenges, and they really don't know where to turn to or how to address that. And part of it is also the challenge that families face, how to handle mental health challenges within the family. With me this evening is one who describes herself as a wife, a mother, a mental health advocate. I'm going to let Miss Clarice Angafo Mbeng introduce herself and the work she's doing. Welcome, Clarice.
Thank you so much. It's a privilege having me on your show tonight. Yeah. Hello everyone and thank you for watching. I am Clarice Angafo, or most people know me as AC Mbeng here on Facebook, which I still my name is anyway. As Lambert said, I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I'm a grandmother. Yeah, and I'm an autism advocate and autism ambassador in the community. I have actually coined down everything and I regard myself as a leading voice of hope and empowerment to those who are facing challenges, to those individuals who are facing life complex issues, and families who have children with special needs. So that's a brief introduction about myself.
Yeah, thank you very much, Clarissa. It's kind of interesting to see one who says as a champion, what motivated you to get into this journey? How did you become an advocate and why are you doing this?
Okay. Most journeys in life, we don't choose the journeys. We don't actually choose it. Sometimes you just find yourself in these journeys. And I always believe that once you found yourself in any journey, any challenge in life, you don't usually go through that journey alone because I know there's a God who guides you. And I believe so much in the fact that God helps us handle what we've been given. Because I know some people sometimes say, God cannot give you what you cannot handle. But I usually choose to say, God helps us handle what we've been given. Yeah, and being an advocate or an autism ambassador, it it's from personal experience with my son. He's 14, going to 15 in October. He'll be 15 in October, almost an adult now, and he's autistic with other forms of disability. Growing Taking care of a child with special needs, it's not always a very simple task. Normally, being a parent or being a mom is challenging, but when you find yourself having to be the parent of a special needs child, the activities or the care that you give to your child is kind of double. even triple sometimes. And there came a time where I actually discovered that as a family, we were kind of isolated, and because of the stigma, because of taboos, and which are attached to disability in our communities, even though in the Western world it still happens. Then at some point, I discovered that we were, when I say we, I mean as a family, we were kind of sidelined, and I didn't really have a voice because people will describe me as that woman with that child who has a disability. I mean, despite the fact that I have a child who has a disability, I'm a person as well, and I also have an identity. So, and that child that you describe me with, he also is an individual and he also has an identity. So, and it just was normal that you have to address him by his name, you have to address the parent by his name. And it also came a point where when we go out for events or for occasions, other children or other adults or other parents, they kind of take their kids away from our own kids, and we realize that people behaved as if his condition is contagious, and that if any child comes closer to him, he or she is going to catch it. And with such behavior, such attitude from the community, obviously, when you live in a community, you want to be involved. You want your child to be involved in everything that's happening. But when you sit and you discover that your next door neighbor or your so-called friend has a child birthday party and they don't invite your own child, so you start wondering what would be the reason behind that. So looking back, we realized that we were almost becoming isolated, and it hurts, and it also it affects the entire family. It affects you the mom, because at some point you start asking, what did I do wrong? Why am I going through all of this? But before I went into the advocacy or being an autism ambassador, I realized that because I discovered I was becoming really worked up, really angry, really upset with the fact that we were not being engaged in activities, or sometimes somebody will tell you, "Oh, don't worry, Clark, we didn't want to bother you because we know your hands are already full." But I think I should be the one to give my excuse for not being able to do what you would have expected me to do, not you, not involving me or not involving my child. So,
No, so let me. So sorry. I am hoping that the experience you are describing is
mhm,
an experience that is based for at the time you're in Cameroon, because you're from Cameroon, but you are currently in the UK. So I'm hoping that the experience you are sharing is an experience from the time you were in Cameroon. Am I right?
no, you're not right, because I had my son here in the UK, and unfortunately, um, stigmatization also happens in the Western world, in our community. It's everywhere. So, and it happens right here in the UK. So, so it didn't happen in Cameroon. Cameroon has its own story, which was when we went to Cameroon in 2014 and 2017, which I'm going to touch that at some point. But how I started raising autism awareness, or how I became an autism advocate, because I discovered that my son needs to have his own voice, because he's autistic, he's also nonverbal. So because I was becoming really upset with almost everyone around me, and I discovered that there was a lot of ignorance. Then at some point, I said to myself that I can't keep feeling this way. Maybe people behaving that way is because they lack understanding. It's because they do not really know exactly what's happening. So I actually decided to turn the story around, and I said, I am going to educate people, I am going to raise awareness. And if anybody out there says anything negative about my child or any other child who is autistic or any other child which has a form of disability, I regard that person as just being ignorant and that the person will need a little bit of education. And that's how I actually started raising autism awareness. And I must tell you that there has been a massive difference. It's been a massive change. And that was when I realized that sometimes people do not, people behave the way they behave towards a disabled child. It's most often like 99% of it is to do with them, not the parent and not the child.
So
So
let's back up a little.
mm,
So you had your child in the UK. The
mm,
guy is turning 14, you said, or 15.
he'll be 15 in October.
So when did you discover that the child was autistic? And for the sake of the audience, what is autism?
Okay. Autism is a neurological invisible condition. It affects the way an individual behaves, it affects the way an individual communicates, and it affects the way an individual interacts with the rest of the society. And then it also affects the way they process. They do have sensory issues, so affects the way they process these sensory issues. Um, there's a saying that once you've seen one child with autism, you've seen just that one child with autism because autism affects each child differently. No two autistic individuals are the same. You may see an autistic child who is very, very fluent in the way he speaks. He can talk for England. On the other hand, you will come across another autistic child who doesn't talk at all, and then you see another one who talks, but anything you say to him, any question you ask him, he repeats what you say, which is called echolalia. So there's that repetitive behavior. And yeah, it affects, autism affects each child differently. And autism is a lifelong, I forgot to mention that autism is a lifelong neurological invisible condition, and it is regarded as a disability as well.
So tell me, is that a mental disability or is, I mean, because neurological again has to do with maybe the mind,
Yeah,
am
yeah,
I right?
kind of the brain. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So,
yeah. They say their brain is wired uh, um, differently. There are
okay.
some autistic individuals who may have other mental issues depending on their comorbidities. Because you do have autistic individuals who have co-occurring conditions or comorbidities. You may have an autistic child who has epilepsy, who has gastroenterology problems and other issues. Yeah, there are so many of them who have co-occurring conditions, and most of them will have co-occurring conditions or other comorbidities. These other occurring conditions, they also affect them as well in maybe in the way they behave, the way they interact, which makes their autism a bit more difficult in the way it affects them. Yeah.
So, I mean, if you, with your permission, let's stay on your son. And so, as a mom, you have a son. When did you discover that your son was autistic, and how was that experience? Did you get a therapist to walk you through? And
Okay. Um, my son, mind you, he was born extremely premature. He was born at 24 weeks, so which means I was just 6 months when I gave birth to him, and he was just 980 grams. So he lived the first half of his life in of his first year in the NICU, the neonatal intensive care unit. So a child being born extremely premature, there will always be an expectation of a delay, of some sort of a delay. It may be global developmental delay, it may be cerebral palsy if they have problems with their brain. So we had always expected something, expected a delay maybe in them achieving the milestones. But I think at around 3 years old, I actually discovered a little bit more because I watched a movie. I can't remember the name of the movie, and some of the things that the little boy in that movie was doing were a bit similar to what my son does. Maybe he will rock, then he was quite particular with other parts, with little parts of a toy, then switching, putting on the switch on and off, on and off. I mean, he had repetitive behavior, and then will not instantly respond to his name when you called him. And so the next time I visited his consultant, so I told him that this is a movie I've watched, and I listed down what I noticed and which are a bit similar to what my son does. And his next appointment letter, autism was included in the letter, that he's autistic. Yeah, and from there now he was being referred to a special needs school. Normally they'll have like an MDT, a multidisciplinary team made up of a pediatrician, an educational psychologist or a clinical psychologist, then a professional or speech and language therapist from school, where they come together, make the decision, or refer him to a special needs school and refer maybe to physiotherapists, occupational therapists, speech and language therapists, for all the therapies where he will be able to have interventions or help in order for us to be able to manage him properly.
So let's go back to your experience. You have taken you watched this. I
Mm.
mean, you watched the movie. You saw the things,
Mm.
or you recognize some of these things. You go to the consultant, and the consultant
Mm.
in your case in the UK, that's a medical doctor, am I right? And then
Yes, yes.
you give you give these signs, and did he tell you then, or he had to send a letter to you telling you? I mean, because I missed that part. Did he just
Sorry.
inform you? Did he inform you then that your child was autistic, or he had to send a letter to you at home saying that this is?
He said they were going to do more checks. That's where the MDT team, that's a multidisciplinary team, came into play. Then they did a few more assessments, a few more checks on him. Then we were told, and then a letter was sent that he's also autistic. I mean, in addition to his other difficulties as well, his other complications from premature birth.
So how did you? How when that decision finally came to you? How did you feel?
Um, to to me, when I look back and when I compare with other parents nowadays who have that diagnosis of their child, to me, my experience was quite different because, like I said, from his birth history being very premature, we had always expected a delay of some sort. We had always known that there was going to be a problem. The thing is, we never knew, or sometimes it's difficult to tell the degree of the difficulty. So to me, autism was just an addition to whatever to his other conditions, and but before then we had been anticipating, waiting for his first words, which he said "mom" around that time when he was 3. Yeah, but he does mime words, but you don't actually get the speaking voice. He's very vocal in his sounds, but you don't really get the spoken words. Even though to me, communication it's not just verbalizing. It's not just about words, because he communicates. I talk with him. We talk with him, and he understands, because when you give him instructions in a structured manner, he follows them. That you go to the room and get your this. Yeah, his understanding is absolutely wonderful. So, if I want to say generally, from when he was born, yes, it was difficult. I also went through that stage of grief, even though I never really knew that I was grieving, but we obviously went through the stage of denial, anger, bargaining, and depression, and then um, acceptance, where you reach that point where you have to say, okay, now this is my child, this is how he or she is going to be, and I'm going to accept him or her the way he is, no matter what happens. So yeah, so it's been a long journey, a lot of challenges, but like I said at the beginning, God will not put you in a situation where He will not help you handle it.
So you mentioned something about a grieving process, and
Hmm.
you talked about it in terms of denial. Okay, so I think your experience is not a typical experience in the sense that because you already had a child at 6 months,
Hmm.
premature,
Yeah,
you expected that somehow down the lines things were going to happen not the ordinary way. So that experience already prepared you for this decision. But
exactly.
that's not a standard way. I mean, for most people, they all of a
Hmm.
sudden discover that this bundle of joy that they have been looking forward to, this gold that God has gifted them with, is
Hmm.
now struggling, and then they go to the hospital praying that what they are thinking should not be it, and then they get that diagnosis, and all hell is like breaking loose on them, isn't it? And then they
Yeah,
have to go through. And I think for most people, they don't go beyond the process, beyond that first stage of denial.
yeah.
Okay, many people remain at that level, and I'm wondering, is that a typical experience you're finding with people who have similar experiences, to children with autism or children with mental health
Yeah,
disorders?
yeah, exactly. It so many parents are struggling to accept their child, and as you said, my case was not a typical case, because we had already expected something, but it doesn't cancel the fact that I I didn't grieve. It doesn't cancel the fact that I never went through the 5 stages of grief of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, which denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. I went through them, but I've spoken to so many parents, and so many of them, their story is, my child was developing normally, my child was talking, and at some point they just stopped, they just regressed, and they never said a word again. You call and they don't respond. Yeah, at that stage, that it's usually very, very difficult because that's not obviously what you were expecting. And so it hits, I think it hits a parent more because you've already heard your child's first words, you've already seen what they are already capable of doing, and then suddenly something happens which you cannot really lay a finger on. You cannot really say what suddenly happened to my child. I know of parents as well who say it was after the MMR vaccine. I can't speak a lot about the vaccine, but other parents can actually vow that their child or that child is autistic because of the vaccine. Yes, so many parents I speak with, they are struggling, especially with going beyond the the denial stage.
So I think that let me transition to some other thing. Let me not stay on that. But I mean, let me get personal with this. First of
Mhm.
all, autism is not some hereditary thing. Am I right? It's not.
It's not hereditary, even though I think that there are some researchers which those who have written the research seem to think that it has something to do with the with it has
So
to do with hereditary because um there are some families who you may have a parent who is autistic and has and will have 2 or 3 children who are also autistic. So if you have to look at that particular example, you may be tempted to think that it is hereditary.
yeah, so Clarice, you and I grew up in a country where we only heard. I personally only heard about autism when I came to the United States.
Yeah.
Okay, so if I go to the like we go to the hospital for a simple checkup and they're asking you your family history, of
Mhm.
course, I've never heard about this, isn't it? But
Mhm.
more importantly for me is in terms of your relationship, let me get to your husband and yourself. Do you ever feel that the blame game where the man wants to blame the wife that this child is as a result of something that you did, or you blaming the husband that I mean, again, hereditary in one sense, or maybe some stress to the pregnancy that is what led to this. Do you ever get to that point where there's a blame game in all of this?
Mhm. I know that that happens with many parents. That happens with some parents, and like I said, I speak a lot with parents, especially the women, and you have so many of them who are going through, who have either gone through that stage or who are still going through. But as far as my own family is concerned, between my husband and myself, fortunately, we've never really gone through that the process where someone is blaming the other person, that probably it's from your family, probably from the other family. And I will actually put that down to um I think your level of education as well, and the level of understanding of what is actually happening. It has a lot to play, despite the fact we are from Africa and we have that mentality back home. But at times, for example, if you are told about autism or any other condition, what comes first to your mind? You really have to put yourself down and study and learn what that thing is all about. Especially with the autism, we had to actually learn about it. We started even practically with my son. Then before I went further to do a postgraduate in autism in 2017, 2018. But I know that one's level of education also has a lot to play as far as that is concerned. But I do think that we are in an era where people have to look beyond that blame game. And at times, I will not really blame families for blaming each.
The level of understanding of what is actually.
Yeah, because it's still that stage. They are still in that. They are still going through the process of denial. And when you are in denial, you're in anger and then in shock. Or when something goes wrong, as human beings, we have the tendency to blame either something or to blame someone. And somehow that makes you feel good that you've accused something else, you've accused somebody for being the cause of this particular thing. But it's not usually the best thing, because when you concentrate as a parent with a child who is autistic, when you concentrate so much on the blame, on blaming each other, you forget the most important thing that you have to do, which is taking care of your child, which is taking time to understand how he behaves, what he does, or how he communicates. Then you concentrate so much on blaming the other person. But at the same time, it's a necessary process to go through, because when you blame, at some point you actually sit and you tell yourself, what's the need, what's the point? There's this center of focus, there's this little person who did not ask to be born the way he was born. Why should we be hitting each other about him? If we focus our attention on him, that's going to yield more fruits. And I think that's what my family, my husband and myself, we've actually done over the years, and that's how we've coped. But I still say, I think our level of education and understanding and our level of acceptance really played a role, because at that point we said he is the center of attention, he is the focus, so we should focus more on him, and any other thing will fall into place.
So thank you very much, and your experience is quite is something that we really need to continue talking about. And if you are just joining the show, you are watching the Lambom Show with AC Mbeng. Barry Carey says, "Thanks for sharing an awareness on mental health and children. It is highly needed." Barry has a couple of questions for you, AC.
Okay.
Can you talk more about OCD with some of these autistic kids? That seems to be a first sign, and now about the delayed speech. That's one.
um I if she's talking about OCD, maybe she's concentrating on on the fact that they have repetitive behavior, or they concentrate on on particular thing. Usually, personally, I don't really associate a lot of I don't associate autism a lot with OCD, because that's a whole topic, that's a whole condition on its own, and autism is one on its own. Some autistic children may also have OCD, but I've not really concentrated a lot in that section. And like I said at the beginning, as far as the speech is concerned, you have some autistic children who can verbally communicate, who can talk, just like you and I. So, because some people usually think that autism is a speech problem. Autism is not. It's not a speech problem, but an autistic child, a child who is autistic, can have difficulties in communication. He can have difficulties in speaking. You have some who speak very fluently. You have some who do not speak at all. You have some who speak but repeating every word that's said. Like if I ask you what is your name, they'll say what is your name before they answer, which they call echolalia. Yeah.
Mhm.
But not being able to speak cannot cannot stop an autistic child from progressing, because there are so many things out there. There are so many tools, so many methods that you could teach your child to be able to communicate. There is Makaton, you have text. Makaton, it's a little bit like sign language, but with Makaton you sign the main words in a sentence, and with Makaton you have speech, you have the symbol, and you have the sign. So when you are speaking, you are showing the symbol of the word you are saying, and that you are signing the word at the same time. And then you have apps with which can actually help children, which you have speech generated devices, and then you have PECS, which is picture exchange communication system, that you can use to help an autistic child to be able to communicate properly. And most often autistic children who do not verbally communicate, they, because at some point they get frustrated, so they tend to push, they tend to pull, because some of them as well, depending on their comorbidities or co-occurring condition, they may not have fine motor skills to be able to point properly. So the tendency is for them to push you, to pull you, or even to cry. So this other methods of communication that you use with them is to be able to minimize that frustration, because between you and I, if I'm speaking in my dialect and you are not understanding, I will get frustrated that I've been talking for a very long time and you seem not to understand. That's the same thing that happens with an autistic child, because he or she would have shown you all the signs, all the cues for you to try and understand that they are communicating with you. So when you do not understand, they get frustrated as well. So that's why you have all the other like the apps, the pets, marketing signing, which are there at, to help you support your child.
So Barry is coming back to say, um, I notice OCD is common with them. So what is their main common characteristic if every one of them is different?
Most of them will be, they'll have repetitive behavior. For example, an autistic child can watch one YouTube video over and over and over, and then he'll be fascinated with a particular section in a particular song or in a particular video. Yeah, and then some uh, do not play alongside their peers. Uh, some will want to just be on their own in their little corner. So that's why they say autism affects the way a child interacts with his or her peers. It affects the way a child interacts with the rest of the community. And then you may be talking to an autistic child and they may not be looking at you. They may be, it will seem as if they're looking through you. So some of them do avoid eye contact. They will not look at you directly in the eyes. But you can call them several times, then before they respond or before they turn around to look at the name, which doesn't mean that they do not hear, but because they process the information, they take time, they take a longer time to process the information. That's why that's why sometimes you can say you can say something to an autistic child at several times before they finally do it. Not because they didn't hear the first time, but because it takes time for them to process the information. Yeah. And
Again,
an autistic individual, they speak, they tell you exactly how they see it. So, um, and some will just say it literally. For example, I I read somewhere that that there was an autistic child and they had a neighbor. So one day they were passing and the boy suddenly said, "I don't like this woman because she's too fat." Yeah. So and you cannot actually tell sometimes you can say, "Oh, it's raining cats and dogs." You can't tell an autistic child that it's raining cats and dogs because they will stand out and they'll be expecting to see cats and
they
dogs.
can.
Yeah, yeah. So whatever you say to them is literal. So when you are speaking with an autistic child, we avoid, when what we used to call back home idioms.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you make a sentence as simple as possible. You don't complicate the sentence, or you don't complicate what you are saying to them, giving them instructions. And autistic individuals as well like their routine. They like things to be very structured. Um, if an autistic child knows that I get up every morning at 6 o'clock, I have my breakfast before brushing my teeth, before having a bath, and then go to school. The next day you get up and you want to brush their teeth before giving them breakfast, it's going to be an issue because it will lead to meltdowns. So they've got routine. They like their routine because it helps them learn as well. It helps them through the day.
So before I come, because I would like us to get into the education part, but Barry says, Miss Clarice, you look so pretty. What do you now think of those kids who were labeled Obanje in the past?
Okay. Yeah, I know that, but anyway, thank you so much for your compliment. Yeah, I know that back home there used to be very awful names that they give to children. I usually don't want to say autistic children because I've looked critically, and those children they used to call Ogbanji children, they are not autistic children. I think they are more of children who have cerebral palsy or something of that sort. But when I look back, there's a lot of lack of education. There's a lot of lack of empathy and and sympathy. People seem to think that because this this has not happened to them, it will never happen. And yeah, that used to happen. It used to happen quite a lot, and you still have people nowadays who will still say, "Oh, they gonna be picking their way. I did just go take care of them. I don't want try to find our money. I get to go look at them. The Chris want them." You still have people who still make such statements nowadays. But once I hear them say such, I at first I used to get very angry, but nowadays I will just tell you, if that was your child, you wouldn't have loved if somebody refers to your child like that, and that actually makes someone to think. So people need a lot of education, and we also need this. We need a lot of awareness and sensitization out there because those children they used to call Ogbanjes are still being locked indoors, are still being locked in the houses. There are still people who are not comfortable at telling another person, telling their friend or their neighbor that I have a child who has special needs or I have a child who has a problem. And people would not still want their child to associate with others just because their child has a form of a disability. That child is the child you have, not the one you thought you were supposed to have. So why not love the one that is in front of you and accept him or her the way he or she is? So yeah.
I think you have immense graces from above to be able to come across, because I know that it is quite challenging taking care of special needs children, isn't it? And to come to that level of acceptance. Maybe, I mean, you mentioned it at the beginning in terms of there was this, you had the community rejecting you, your kids, and all that, not inviting you to parties. But given the education that you have done, how is that experience now? Is the community gradually coming to terms, or they are now just compelled to say, because she has educated us, maybe let's not just get back to the old ways? What is the situation these days with the community reacting to your child?
When I look when I look back to 2015, I think it was actually when I started like coming really powerfully on social media, because I started with social excuse me, I started with social media because I actually wanted my message to go beyond just my community here, because I know there are people back home. When I say back home, I mean Cameroon in Africa, who need to know, who need to be aware of this. So when I look back, there's a massive difference, because you can see people these talk comfortably about their child having a disability. You can actually see that there's a great level of understanding and acceptance. And also, I concentrated on the younger ones. Why? Because there was a time a friend's daughter actually asked my son this way to her other friends, and I was hurt. I was really, really hurt, because I said to myself, if the parents of this child had actually explained to them what my child was going through, that little girl wouldn't have described my son like this to her friends. But at the same time, I said to myself, if I had educated, if I had made this little girl's parents to understand more about my son, about his condition, about what he's going through, they would have actually educated their own child. So I started as well with, having an awareness session with children, with the younger ones. And nowadays, there are so many young girls and young boys in my community now who can actually stand and talk about autism, and I will actually say, oh, he is not going to hurt you, he's not going to harm you, because he's autistic. So sometimes he doesn't really understand what you mean or what you are doing, but he will not hurt you. Whereas at first they used to be afraid that he can hit them, he can do something to them. And yeah, so there's been a massive difference, even though not 100%. Some people will never change, no matter what you do, no matter what you say. People will still have the archaic method of thinking. Yeah, but you cannot force change into someone. You can only do your best to educate, to make them understand, and you leave it at that.
If you are just joining us, you're watching the Lambom Show, and today we are hosting a mother, a wife, a mental health advocate, ambassador for autism, AC Mbeng from the UK. And again, AC, thank you for your experience. I wanted us, I mean, does your son go to school, and how has that experience been?
Oh yes, he goes to school. Every child, no matter their ability, no matter whatever needs they have the right to go to school. Yes, my son goes to school, and it's been a brilliant experience. Yeah, he's secondary school now, so we have a good we have good teachers at school who, because we work hand in hand with teachers at school, and they support him, and they send home a homework where we can also continue the process from school, especially during the holidays, like summer holidays, which is a little bit of a long period. So yes, he goes to school, but special needs children, they do have their own program, and it's called it's IEP. Yeah, so that program is tailored according to their needs. So each child in the class will have his or her own individual educational plan. So they have their own plan, their own study based on the curriculum, and also based on their needs, because the level of need differ. You have some children who will need one-to-one support. Some who are a bit challenging may need two-to-one support. And yeah, so yeah, so any child with any form of a disability has the right to go to school. Yes, and at times it may be difficult, especially back home, because I know parents who have told me that their children have been turned away from school. Usually, what why that happens is because they don't have trained professionals to cater for the children's needs, and you have teachers who have a general knowledge in education, but not special needs education, so they cannot support a child with special needs.
So the reason why I asked the question about schooling is because at times you find children who go to a regular school and they have special needs. So you have some particular classes that are dedicated to them. Back
Okay.
home, back in Cameroon, is a challenge. So your child is in secondary school. What are the hopes? What are the aspirations? What is the experience? Does he come home complaining that other kids, or is it just strictly speaking special needs school?
It's strictly speaking special needs school, autism oriented. And yes, there are special needs children who go to mainstream school, as we call it here in the UK. Usually it depends on the level of needs and the level of support that they need, because there's usually an assessment, maybe from an educational psychologist or a clinical psychologist, to based on the child's needs. Then they'll know which school is appropriate for the child. As well, a parent has a greater role to play in it as well, because the parent understands the child better. And you there are some extreme cases where some parents will insist that their child should go to a mainstream school, but when they go there, at the end of the day, they discover that their child is not receiving the support or the help that they deserve based on their needs. And not all mainstream schools will be able to provide a one-on-one support for a special needs child.
So, what are some of the challenges? What are some of the challenges you, as a mother with a special needs child, what are some of the challenges you're facing bringing up your child? I mean, I know you have talked about a stigma in the community, but I mean, for somebody who's at home watching you today, maybe trying to identify what are some of those challenges and how have you overcome these challenges yourself?
Okay. In my case, I talked about him not being able to verbally communicate. Yes, sometimes even with the communication aids and everything, at times, because his vocabulary is so massive. He's got a lot in his mind that he has to say, but his communication book is not able to accommodate everything that he has. So sometimes, as a parent, you just wish your child could just open his mouth and speak and just say exactly what he wants. Or when he gets frustrated, at times he can just cry. And uh, having a teenager who will just sit and cry, it's frustrating as well. And so at times you really wish that he could really tell you exactly what he wants. We also have situations because there are some autistic children, because of their comorbidities. It takes a longer time for them to be potty trained or to be toilet trained, where you still need to support them all round with their personal care needs. And it's also difficult. Other parents who have 14-year-olds or 15-year olds, they they can actually go out and leave their 15-year-old or their 14-year-old at home, because they know they are capable of taking care of themselves. But I can't, because he needs that attention. He needs that supervision, that monitoring all the time, probably all round the clock. Yeah, it can be challenging, especially when you look into the future. Sometimes you look into the future, it's a little bit bleak, because you cannot, though everyone, whether with a special needs or not, you cannot really predict the future. But at times you look a little bit beyond, a little bit further into the future, and you can't really say then in that case, you just take one day as it comes, and we keep on supporting him in every possible way, and also helping him to be able to gain independent skills, or basic skills like going to the shops, maybe doing laundry, and tidying up his room. Yeah, taking care of his own hygiene needs as well. Yeah, so we support him around that area. But generally, being a parent of a child with a special needs, it's usually like triple the job that any mom will do, especially when it comes to a child who needs all round um, attention, who needs all round care and help. Yeah, and
So
as also it's when you are a parent with a special needs child, you are very protective because somehow they are vulnerable, especially those cannot really who cannot really verbalize, or who cannot really say exactly what they want or what somebody has done or said to them. So you become very protective. You, as a mom, I become that mother hen. You know, when a hen has just hatched her chickens, you know how protective she is when she sees a hawk flying up there. So as a special needs mom, usually that's how we are. We are very protective of our own. So you cannot just sit and you call any friend, please, can I bring my child around? Do you want to uh, babysit so I go somewhere? You cannot just do that because before you make that phone call to somebody you should really trust. You trust that person with your own self, then you have to trust that person with your own child as well. You don't want someone to babysit your child who will end up, oh, this foolish thing, they don't understand anything. And things like that, you have to know your circle, and you have to know those who love your child genuinely, who appreciate you, who appreciate your child the way he or she is. And you know that if I'm asking for help from someone, I know that this person is helping me genuinely and not helping me because they pity me, or not helping me to babysit my child, then they go tomorrow and start making stories. So at times it's difficult as well. And again, some of the challenges as well is being able to maintain a full-time job with the moms or parents, depending on who has the main care responsibility for the child. At times, too, it's very difficult because as a parent, as a mom, you tend to work around your child's needs. There are times there are lots of hospital appointments, there are lots of therapy sessions you have to go to, and if you're at and they suddenly call you that your child has a problem, or there's a problem at school, you need to pick up your child. You have to leave your work, you have to leave and you pick up the child because depending on who is in your circle, you may not immediately have someone to go and pick up your child for you. So yeah.
yeah, the other part of family life, which I mean, we have not touched is, do you have any other kids? And
Yeah.
how's that interaction been?
So usually I always describe myself as I mother children with different needs. That I'm mothering a child with special needs, and another one with who doesn't have special needs, but who also has his own needs, just like any other child. It's been an incredible journey between the two. There's a gap. There's an age difference of 5. Yeah, and there's also a difference with the height. One is so tall up there, another one is a little bit. Yes, they are best buddies here, and they do have sibling rival when it comes to playing it to fighting over the remote control, and who has to watch which TV program because they both have their own choices, their own TV programs that they watch. But my 10-year-old, he's an amazing young boy. He calls himself an autism expert. So because being an autism ambassador, I and being a mom as well, as parents, we had to let him know, to understand right from an early age that this is your brother, this is how he is. As we live together, we have to accept him the way he is, and we have to support him and in any possible way that we can. And he's been doing just that. But even though there are challenges, especially during this lockdown, because they've been together for too long under the same roof for a very long time. So my 10-year-old he also gets frustrated as well. Oh, he keeps asking me to do this. He keeps asking me to do things for him. And yeah, so he's been he's been good. I think we've passed down the right button to him, the right thing to do, because he's a very empathetic young man and mindful too. He actually recognizes some children at his school who are autistic.
Oh wow.
Yes, there was a he has a friend was a bit, and I think he's about 2 years younger than him. There was a time he actually told me that, Mom, do you know that he's autistic? I was like, how do you know? Did his mom tell you? He said no. Did his dad tell you? He said no. I said, how did you know? I know, but I just know he's doing the same things like my brother. He's doing the same things like Lesra. I said, if his mom doesn't tell you or his dad doesn't tell you, you don't say it that he's autistic. Then he insisted that I think he's autistic. I was playing with him. I'm communicating with him. He's not talking, but he wants to play with me. So I know how to play with him and I understand. And then suddenly he came back with the boy's mom and he said, "Here's his mom. I've gone and asked his mom, and his mom said yes, he's autistic." So
Wow. That's an incredible thing. So
yeah.
let's I mean maybe we are getting to the end from where we ought to have started, because you took up the 25 push-ups challenge for 25 days.
Mhm.
What was that? I mean, I'm sure you can easily talk about it in terms of the fact that you have an autistic child, and maybe that is why. But I guess there's more to it. Why did you get involved in that, and how was that experience?
Well, I thank the person who brought up this idea of the 25 push-ups for 25 days for PTSD, anxiety, depression, or any form of mental illness. I really thank that person because, first and foremost, mental health illnesses, mental health problems, they're not really something which people talk a lot about. So most would like to brush it under the carpet. Most will not really want to talk about it because probably the stigmatization and the way most people are being looked at when they say they they have a mental problem. And why that is, which I've discovered, is each time somebody says they have a mental problem, people already take it to extremes. Oh, probably he or she is someone who has to be walking along the street, picking up papers, being naked, or being locked up in an institution because they have a mental illness. No, it's not like that. It doesn't have to be that way. Each and every one of us in our lives would, or a family member would have experienced some form of a mental problem at some point. It may just be a few days with depression, depending on what the cause is. But when you are a parent of a special needs child, or parent of someone who has a child with a disability, or a parent who has a child in heaven, you must have gone through that process of grief at some point in your life. And that process of grief is you go through denial, you go through anger, you bargain, then depression hits you at some point, and acceptance. I've been through all of those. I remember at the beginning I said I my son was born very premature. So I had grieved the child I would have had um, at full term at 40 weeks, but I had him at 26 at 24 weeks. Yes, and he is grown up with autism. He's grown up with other forms of disability. I've also grieved that child I thought I would have had without a disability. And when you are grieving any individual, at some point you get depressed, and depending on how it affects you and your support system. And most women have suffered with postnatal depression after having a baby. So I fall under all these categories. And when this challenge came up, I said to myself, I've got to join in. First of all, one of my friends nominated me. I was still contemplating because I wasn't sure I was going to be able to dedicate that time to do them 25 days. Then another big sister in the community nominated me again, and I said, yes, I have to take this up. When I was taking this challenge up, what I had in mind was I have to keep giving a voice because on my show as the voice of Hope Media, I give a voice, and that's why I regard myself as the leading voice of hope and empowerment, where I educate, I empower, I inspire, and I give hope to people who have faced lifelong challenges or who have faced difficulties or who have special needs children. So I saw it as an opportunity to continue to give a voice to this problem, to these mental health issues, depression, anxiety, um, yeah, to depression, uh, PTSD, any form of mental health, so that to start a conversation so that people should feel comfortable, people should feel confident and be able to talk about this without being afraid that somebody's going to judge them, so that they should be able to speak up, speak out, and know that they matter without being afraid that they'll be ridiculed or whatever. So when I took up the challenge, my main aim was that I will continue to give a voice to this to mental illnesses and ill. Then I knew that even if it's one person that I touch, I would have made a difference in somebody's life. I was shocked. I was shocked. I think the second or the third week, I felt I started getting up every morning feeling like I'm in a brand new body. You know, most of us would have gone through some form of depression during this COVID pandemic, and that's okay. Many people have been stuck indoors, and you I for one have kind of accumulated a bit of weight, which normally it would take a long time for me to put on weight. So I saw that as a means of exercise where I could actually do it frequently. I could actually take it up and do it. But little did I know that I was going to gain a physical and mental health that I've always desired. I mean, I trimmed down after just 25 days doing the push-up, and I felt more energized after doing the push-ups. Then I actually discovered that when I sit down, because I also work from home, I was always looking forward. I was always looking forward to doing my work because at some point I became um, kind of discouraged. You get up every morning, it's the same routine. You have to work from home, and at times it can be a bit boring when you're working from home. Given that this was my first time to start working from home, so the benefit to me for this push-up has been first, I know with my push-ups, I've given a voice, I've touched so many lives because I know how many people reached out to me to say how inspired they've been because of the push-ups. It wasn't a matter of being a perfectionist while doing the push-ups. I started the first day and I thought I'd really done it. Then when I saw the comments, then some friends came to me on Messenger and they said, Clarice, you really need to adjust the way you are placing your hands, you adjust the way you are placing your back. If not, you'll end up having a problem on your back. So it was also a learning process. I went to YouTube now and I started looking, how do I place my hands? How do I do this? And it's made a massive difference in my mental health and in my physical health as well. I mean, after my 25 days, I had a photo, so I made this massive show of the the A shape. I posted, and for your information, I've continued. I actually did my 40, the fourth, number 40. That's the 40th day of the push-ups today. So I've just taken that as part of my exercises. I never used to be that person who will go frequently for exercises, but Every day now, I go out for a run, even if it means just doing 10 push-ups. I still do them, and I intend to continue because I have first-hand experience of the benefits of this push-up. First of all, my mental health, yes. My physical health, yes. And I've given a voice, and I've reached out to so many. I had to go from first day till the last day, and I went to all my videos and I calculated how many views each video had, and I had more than 5,000 views, almost 10,000 views for all the 25 days that I used to post it. So it's gone across so many platforms and it's reached so many people.
Right. So again, it is a great initiative, and for our community, that is why we are having this conversation this late. It is, I think, midnight your time in the UK, or 5 minutes after that. But
Okay.
it's not just because we lack something to do. We're trying to give a voice to something, and I want to really appreciate the experience that you shared. And the one part that we have not really touched on tonight is the issue of teenagers, isn't it? Because again, increasingly, we are finding that our teenagers are having a tough time
Mhm.
managing issues. Okay,
Okay.
they are in school, the competition in school is tough. They get into, lots of different things, and in fact, you start seeing teenagers committing suicide. I mean, those are things that were unthinkable, you know.
Mm.
So I mean, you have a teenage son who is autistic and you are managing him in a certain way. But for the sake of those who are watching and who may want one or two tips on how to manage their kids in order to, maintain that balance, that mental health balance for them, what are some of the things you suggest?
Okay. As parents, most often we actually forget about our children's mental health, right? We all know that mental health includes our emotional, psychological, and our social well-being. Then it affects the way we feel, we think, we act. Then it also affects how we handle stress. So, as a parent, if you are unable to handle your own stress or the things that are happening around you, it also affects your children. And so, a child with mental health issues um, will not be able to manage their own activities or their own selves. So, my advice that I can give to parents who have whether a teenage child or it can be a child of any age because mental health can affect children at a very young age anyway. That parents should create that avenue to communicate, to talk with their children, to talk about their mental health. I was surprised one day when I asked my 10-year-old, then he was 8, "And what does he know about depression?" He said to me, "Depression is when somebody is very, very, very sad." He emphasized on very, very, very sad. Then he said, "and sad for a very long time." Right. Okay. And which in itself is true. So it's good for parents to be able to acknowledge that um, their own children's mental health is equally as important as their own physical health. So are we should endeavor to create that conversation to talk about these mental health issues and actually talk to them and find out what their difficulties are. At times, a child may be bullied at school, and if parents do not talk with their children, parents may not know. Some children will not be able to tell their parents that this is what is happening. So, encouraging a conversation with your child is absolutely important.
Well, so ladies and gentlemen, you've been watching the Lambom Show, and tonight we've been talking about children and mental health. And again, you find that amongst our community, we still have the benefit of, this family spirit, isn't it? Even though when we talk about this family spirit, it's something that shows up only during celebrations. You find the same community that celebrates a family is unable to support someone who has a special needs child. They're taking away support from that person. They don't want their children to mix up with this one. They don't want to interact with all that. And our community too, I'm not sure there are many parents who can talk like you do about their child as being autistic because it's incredible, it's terrible. Who is going to say that? How are they going to look at me? But these are things that, for the sake of the community, for the sake of that education, and even for the sake of the child, because very often I think one of the things I've noticed is we parents, we put our needs above the needs of our kids, isn't it? We're looking at ourselves and forgetting that our children, they need that support. And beyond us, it's not about how the community is going to look at me, okay, but how together we can do something. And I think we really need to get back to that point which you made so eloquently, which is that, as you think about the physical health of your child, also think about the mental health of your child. And there is no point in, focusing on the physical and not also paying attention to the mental. It is that famous thing about you have a wound and you take a paper, and you put a beautiful thing and the thing continues to fester, isn't it? And in fact becomes cancerous. We need to start looking at this. Okay, need to start addressing some of these for our community. And I think that our young people, our teenagers, those in schools, unlike for many people who went to, maybe they had opportunity to go to boarding schools where the experience was different, it is not the same experience for most of our kids in the developed world, isn't it? They stay with us until they eventually go out to college. And the challenges there are, again, they are enormous. Children in middle school and high school in the United States or the UK, it's not easy, but
Yeah.
parents, there's a lot of help that we can get within these communities. Okay.
Mhm.
And I think that, I need to be respectful of your time. I don't know what I have any last words, anything you want to talk about before we wrap up?
Yeah, as I said, mental health is very important, whether you are a child or an adult, a dad, a mom, or anyone. It affects every person. And discussions around mental health should be held with our children at a very young age. You can actually encourage your child just to talk about their emotions. There are times your child may be suffering with anxiety. And how does that manifest itself? They will wake up every morning and they tell you, it hurts here, it hurts there, it hurts here. That's the child telling you that, and I have anxiety problem. That's the child communicating with you that there's something wrong somewhere. So parents, please have that discussion about mental health with your children as early as possible. I mean, at a very young age, just by talking about their emotions, you feel sad, what made you feel that way, etc., etc. And I remember last year I had a conversation with a young girl. She's about 20, and she said, you know, back home we used to have some parents who will leave their children behind and either go to the US, to the UK for greener pastures, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. There's something that this girl mentioned to me last year that many parents do not know the effect of that move on their children. It affects their children's mental health. But the thing is that many parents they do not know why, because us the parents, we are living, we are concentrated on the financial aspect of it. When I go to the US, when I go to the UK, or when I go to Germany or to wherever, I'm going to work. I'm going to do a sleepless nights of work. I'm going to get more money, and then I will come back home and bring you there. Do they actually think of what would have happened to their children while they are staying back home? There are times as parents we put a lot of importance on money, on finance. Yes, finance helps. It helps solve many problems, but unfortunately, money cannot help mend a broken brain. Once a child or an adult, once you have a problem with your brain, the money you've spent so many years looking for, unfortunately, will not be able to mend that brain that has a problem because of things which have happened over the years. So, what I'm actually saying is that parents also have to think about their children, not only about the well being, that my child is going to look good in putting on. If I'm abroad, I'll send the best clothes, the best shoes, and send them to the best school possible because I can afford it. I have the money to pay for that school. Their mental health is affected as well. And another aspect that I'm saying this thinking about back home, another issue that may affect children from childhood that may also affect their mental health as well is that there are children who do not grow up with their biological parents, children who maybe they've been raised by other family members or maybe an auntie or somebody else. Most of those children struggle in the long run because as they were growing up wherever they were, they may not have had that maternal bond or that parental biological parental bond or care from their own parents. Not that whoever they grew up with did not take care of them, but when I look back at so many individuals I've been speaking with, there's something that used to be lacking, and in the long run, it affects them mentally. It may actually just be maybe maybe depression. Yeah. So and to parents who have special needs children, parents who have autistic children, what I would like to say is love the child that you have there, right there in front of you. Take your time, understand the child's needs, accept him the way he or she is, because that's the child you physically have now, not the one you thought you would have had. Look beyond your child's disability, and you'll be able to see that your child is capable of doing so many things despite their difficulties.
AC, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. Bring my apologies to your family for keeping you up this late. And for the sake, I really want to thank those who have been watching. And like I said, throughout the month of August, we have had this is our third series on mental health. And we have actually created a little community, those who have been engaged on this show. Okay, so we have a WhatsApp group that we have created, and it's meant to do what? To continue the conversations, bringing together people who have engaged in the 25 push ups for 25 days. But beyond that, also looking for experts so that those who come in and need help will be able to direct them to these experts. And definitely for participating tonight, AC, I'm going to include you in that platform. We are saying mental health is not a death sentence. There is help. There is help. We should not be suffering with this, especially in the developed world. There is a lot of help. There was a story that I was going to share, but I think I'll leave that for next time. I want to thank everybody. Let's continue the conversations. Let's continue encouraging each other. And I like people to go up and AC, when is your next show coming? You changed your show from the Sanglu show to the Voice of Hope. So,
Media, yeah,
yes,
because it carries a lot of things, and yeah, the voice of hope. Yeah, I'm the voice of hope. I give
right.
hope. When I open my mouth and I speak, I give a lot of hope to so many people, and I know that I've given hope to one person here watching today.
Uh,
And yeah, one more thing
yes,
that
yeah.
which I would like to tell every parent with a special needs child is it's not the end of your life. You can achieve whatever thing you want to achieve. Your dreams, your aspirations may be delayed because of the time you need to take care of your child, but they can never be denied. Another thing is parents of special needs children have to take care of yourself. You have to create time for your own self, for your own me time, because at times it might hit you. At some point you might crash if you're not careful. You have to be in a good state of mind, both mentally and physically, so as to be able to take care of your own child, and you take care of your mental health, which is very, very important. You see me glowing today, you see me smiling today. I never used to have this smile or this glow on my face. So it's been work over time, and That's all I have for tonight.
Oh, Lacey, I mean, thank you very much. It's a process, isn't it? To be able to get to that point of acceptance, you have gone through the grieving process, isn't it? And I'm happy you kept coming back. And I mean, it struck me that you talked about grieving the death of a child that you want, the kind of child you wanted, isn't it? In order to accept this. It's a very important concept that people need to again come to terms with. But again, what can we do? We'll continue the conversations. AC has something on Mondays, I think.
On
She has
no
the motivation Mondays, or what is it they call it?
on my show, I do every Mondays I have a Monday motivation. You
Monday
Yeah,
motivation.
we all know what the weekend looks like. You enjoy over the weekend. Then when Monday starts coming, like, oh, not Monday again. So you need that thing that will like push you. Okay, I'm looking forward to a Monday. So that's where my Monday motivation comes in. And then Saturdays we give a voice. It's a Let's Give It a Voice edition over at the Voice of Hope Media. So we give a voice to these issues, which one of them is also mental health. To these issues, which so many people think it should be hidden under the carpet. So many people, yes, truly, some of these issues, they are very painful when you think about them, when you want to talk about them. But I know that what we give a voice to has the power to heal us. It has the power to save and change a life out there. So that's all.
We can continue talking forever, but I think that we can keep that for another day. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Good evening, good night. You've been listening to watching the Lambom Show. I'll be on again on Friday and on Saturday. Thanks, and until then, AC, thank you very much, and have a good night.
Thank you. Same to you. Bye bye. Thanks.